You are listening to the Enormocast.
The Enormocast presents La Sportiva Legends.
Welcome to the lineup of the most legendary climbing shoes ever made. The performance majesty of the Mira, the OG downturned innovation of the Testarossa, the El-Cap dominance of the TC Pro, the precision power of the Solution, and that brilliant all-arounder, the Mythos. All legends, all still leading the pack, all of them immortal. And now, coming in spring 2022, the venerable Katana Lace-Up gets an update to legend status. So many legendary shoes. It's easy to forget that Sportiva is still innovating with legends in the making, like the indoor dominating Theory. So if the word legend is something that makes you want to buy shoes, check out both the new and legendary at Sportiva.com or your favorite shop. You're good enough, you're smart enough, and you deserve a legend. Did I say legend enough? You think they got it? All right, that's a wrap.
In this topsy-turvy world, where we are presented with one divisive issue after another, the Enormocast has always believed that we, as a global community of climbers striving for a more perfect world, can agree on one simple thing. Titanium on a baseball hat is fucking cool. OG Enormocast sponsor Peter W. Gilroy came upon this simple, obvious truth during a fever dream some years ago and started producing his amazing splitter hats with mountain-inspired titanium plaques to universal acclaim. That's right, folks, titanium on hats. Don't believe that's possible, or don't believe you can handle it? Don't be absurd. After all, you sent the yellow route on your second try last Tuesday, you sick little bird. So reward yourself or a loved one and go check out all of Peter's mountain-inspired accessories and jewelry, and yes, splitter hats, over at peterwgilroy.com, and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount and to help the Enormocast. That's peterwgilroy.com.
We gotta get
Listen, where are you playing in town? Are you playing here?
We're doing the Enormo Dome, whatever it is. It's terrific.
Oh,
It's
yeah,
big
big
house. We
place,
sold
that
it out.
side of town. That's a
Very
big
nice.
place. You sold
What's
it
that,
out.
20,000
I'll say.
seats? We really should.
Look, you better get up there before you panic. Those pens are loose. You're very good. I have really enjoyed climbing with you. We'll make it. I don't think so. But we shall continue with style. Good weather, bad weather. Now or later, anytime for climbing.
Today's show is brought to you by Black Diamond Equipment, with support from Maxim Ropes.
And the fine folks at La Sportiva. And don't forget our charter sponsor, Bonfire Coffee. Go to bonfirecoffee.com and enter Enormo at checkout for a discount on great coffee and to support the Enormocast.
And now back to the show.
Hello and welcome to the Enormocast. This is your host, Chris Kalous. It is about 9 a.m. on the 28th of February, 2022, for those of you tuning in from the future. And this is episode 237 of the Enormocast, a conversation with Anna Hazelnutt. And I have had a lot of coffee this morning, so I am deliberately trying to slow my speech. But that's probably not going to last very long.
Good place to mention Bonfire Coffee. Get a discount on Bonfire Coffee at bonfirecoffee.com. Enter Enormo at checkout. One of my oldest products.
I sort of found Anna Hazelnutt on the internet, as you might have as well, which means this old crusty climber is delving into the world of Instagram superstars again. Checking it out, dipping in. Anna recently made news because she climbed an infamous climb over in the UK called Once Upon a Time in the Southwest. And so she climbed that, and the kind of legend that goes with it, which turns out to be somewhat true. a true-ish statement that she had never climbed any harder than 5'9" on gear before doing this route, which is hard on the coast somewhere in the UK, in the southwest, I presume, somewhere in the southwest because of the name. Anyhow, we'll get to that in just a sec. The only business I want to do today is to mention that the AAC's gala, still don't know how to pronounce that word. Gala sounds the best. Gala is coming up on the weekend of the 25th through 27th of March, and I just wanted to give a shout out, not because I'm in any way professionally affiliated with the AAC. I like the AAC. I have many, many friends that work at the AAC, and they invited me to come over, but I'm not going to be able to make it because my parents are in town that week for the first time since pre-pandemic, and my son and my birthday is on the 25th. We share the birthday. Belongs to him now. I don't really care anymore. But yeah, so we're going to be out of town in Moab, Utah. So I'm going to miss it, which is a bummer because my friends Jordan Cannon and Mark Hudon are sort of the keynote presenters. Ashley up at the Sharp End Podcast is doing a live podcast, which I would love to see and help out with. And yeah, it's just going to be a lot of fun. So if that's something that interests you and you live anywhere around or want to travel to Denver that weekend, go over to the AAC site and check it out, their annual benefit gala. So yeah, 26th, 27th of March. Did I say February before? I might have. I'm not going to go back and edit that, though. I'm saying March now. Now on to the interview with Anna. I started watching Anna on the internet, Instagram. She's got a YouTube channel, sort of one of these younger, she's not super young, but climbers who have kind of made their renown by using social media. And as you know, from not just this show, but also the Run Out, I can be a little cynical about that. But what I like to do on this show is break through my own crust, and nevertheless reach out to these people and find out what's going on. Because as usual, I am surprised pleasantly to know that my cynicism is unfounded. It's just part of being a pre-internet generation. I'm suspicious. But I've been following Anna for a little while, and interestingly, I actually was in the same room with her in Lander at the Gannett Grill waiting for food, and I was like, oh, there she is. In that internet way of like recognizing somebody's face. I usually have to talk before anyone recognizes me. But yeah, I see her, but she was like hanging out with her posse, and I was like, oh, I can't, I hate the cold attack in terms of like, hey, do you want to do the Enormocast? Like I swagger in, this dude of a certain age, just like coming in hot from across the bar, beer in hand. I'm sure that'd be like, yeah, I'm uncomfortable now. Anyhow, I put it in the back of my head, and I did a less uncomfortable thing of simply messaging her and asking her if she'd like to do the Enormocast, and she said yes. Amazing. I'm still like, I don't know, I'm still like sort of shy about asking people to do the show. Isn't that fucked up? 10 years later, with all the success, almost nobody has said no. A couple people, but almost no one has said no, and yet I'm still weirded out by asking people to do the show. That's a little secret for you guys. Anyhow, we got the show done. We talked about the E9 over there in the UK. We talked about how she became so good at that so quickly, and a bunch of other stuff. I even awkwardly asked her about what it's like to be a woman in the climbing sphere and the internet sphere, social media sphere. So that's very enlightening. So here we go. Nice, long, fun interview with Anna Hazelnutt.
Brr. It's wintertime, buckaroos. As my daddy still says, it's colder than the well drillers took us out there. Which means them doggies are shivering, and you got death metal blasting in the dark of the early morn, because you're on your way to go ice climbing. And though in this cowpoke's opinion, they should be staging an intervention rather than stoking the addiction, Black Diamond is, and has always been, at the forefront of innovation when it comes to pier, ice, and mixed climbing. I mean, just look at the names of Black Diamond's ice tools for crying out loud. The Cobra, the Reactor, the Fuel, the Viper. How the hell are you not going to feel like a boss wielding two Vipers in your hands? Of course, it helps to forget that Vipers generally would stay away from ice or go dormant in those temperatures, as would Cobras. But try not to think about that while you're swinging your way up a glorious blue chunk of God's frozen creation. So once the natural euphoria of rewarming your hands begins to ebb, head over to blackdiamondequipment.com or your favorite local shop and check out BD's ice tools, ice screws, apparel, and all the other accoutrement that goes with scraping up frozen rock and water. Because hell, aren't we really just here for the accoutrement?
I'm curious when I talk to someone like you, and looking back through your social media, and that's how I found out about you. I just, I follow climbers, and the thing suggests to follow other climbers, and I end up, following all the climbers. And so I think I've probably been following you for, I don't know, a couple years, maybe not quite that long, but it seems like you were sort of, and you can correct this because I'm only like looking at what I could find on the internet. You were sort of a van life or kind of normal, if you will, climber out there climbing. And at some point you did seem to make a conscious decision to pivot to at least some level of becoming a public figure, whatever you want to count that level as a social media person. I kind of wanted to ask about that evolution because a lot of climbers would prefer, just to go climbing. And I think we all kind of have part of that in us of just being this unknown climber out there doing the things that we love. But here I am with this stupid podcast. So I made a decision to become a public figure or at least try to. And it worked out or didn't work out. I mean, depends on how you feel about that.
It worked out, yeah.
Yeah. Well, whether I wanted to be one or not.
Sure.
So there's a choice. And we were just talking about how it comes with these disadvantages. It comes with this, this need to post daily and to answer messages and all these other sort of downsides. So can you talk a little bit about that evolution, whether it was a moment or whether it was something that kind of you just started to see build and thought you'd take the reins of, or how that kind of happened from average sort of woman out there climbing to internet personality and someone who's pursuing, sponsorship and a professional level of climbing?
It's a really good question because I feel like I've gone through so many phases in the process. Right. In high school or whatever, before, like when Instagram wasn't so popular, I was kind of against all social media and I didn't really want an Instagram. I didn't really want a Facebook. I had one just because at the time it was how you did group projects and things for university. So I was kind of anti-social media. And then I remember my freshman year of university, my dorm mate, my roommate, she was like, you should totally make an Instagram for your climbing. I was like, that's kind of weird, right? She's like, no, it's awesome. You never know what will happen from it. So she literally grabbed my phone and made an Instagram for me. And then from then on, I was like, okay, it'll just be for climbing because I don't really feel like posting my private life online makes any sense. This just doesn't, it's like a completely foreign world to me. So I had this Instagram and I only posted climbing photos on it and some videos, I think. And then at some point, I think people kind of started following me and maybe I had a couple thousand followers and I realized, oh wow, people kind of like this. And so then I started going 100% in. I started posting 4 or 5 times a week and just doing what everyone says you have to do to grow, and I was looking up things online, okay, maybe if I just put my heart into this will work. And then I think that I totally got burnt out. And it was maybe last year or 2 years ago when I just realized that I didn't have to post every day. I didn't have to do any of this. It's just for fun. So I kind of put my foot off of the gas pedal and just started relearning how to just be, I guess, mentally okay with having a social presence. Because at this point it was growing maybe to 10K, something around there. And I was like, this is really cool, but it's not going to consume my life. And of course, it was kind of when I took that step back that everything exploded because I was focusing more on climbing and traveling and doing what I actually wanted to do. And then getting photos of that and here's a random photo or here's a funny clip of me just not caring. And then now we're here. I think it's really easy to let it consume your life. And sometimes it's a lot, you're trying to post or whatever. So I try not to do that. I only post when I feel like it.
Yeah. And I guess then the question embedded in that, because that's sort of the logistics of using it. It's interesting. I think Mary Eden told me the exact same story of someone making her Instagram profile first, like in, you know, taking your phone and saying, you need to do this and making it for us. So it's kind of interesting that it's the same thing sort of happened to you. I guess also in the question though, is that, you know, that switch to kind of wanting what comes with it. And you know, there was a question I might ask somebody from 20 years ago of just like, well, when did you decide to start, you know, bugging people about giving you free shoes? You know, that was kind of like how you did it then. What do you think was a turning point of saying like, well, if I keep building this, I'll get, you know, maybe make this life in climbing for myself versus like a billion other things that you could pursue while you're a climber? Or sort of sub question D is that, what are you pursuing besides just being a climber?
Yeah, I guess in a roundabout way, I did just talk you through my whole Instagram experience, but I guess the main point of it was always to do it as being a climber. Like the second my friend took my phone, or my roommate, she took my phone and made an Instagram, it was solely for the purpose of doing something with climbing. Like it was completely, even though I guess I wasn't necessarily hands-on from the start, it was always with the intention of like, maybe something will happen from this. And I guess the moment when I really started taking that seriously was when I started getting followers, maybe 10K or so. I was like, okay, I'm officially in the public eye. And even if it's not that much, it's still kind of a lot for our niche little community. And I just started making sure that what I was posting and presenting to the world was something that I would be proud of. But the whole time it was never really, I don't know. It was never really like, oh, I'm just going to do this and just like have no reason for it. Like there was always climbing. It was always climbing specific.
Okay. And what did you go to university for?
I graduated a few years ago. I started off like pre-med, and then I went to biopsychology. So like our biochemical neuroscience kind of program. And then I realized like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go to med school. So I tagged on an English minor last minute. So yeah.
Very useful. I'm an English major myself.
I really liked it. I think it helped
cool.
like with videos and everything. I think it helps with all of it.
It's funny because that's always, I'm like, yeah, here's my English majors. I'm like painting another house. But one of the reasons, you know, as I'm scrolling around and looking at sort of internet climbers, one of the reasons I started to really look and watch you, and in a way, you know, prompted me to be like, I want to get in touch with her, is because I saw like, you know, there was all the goofy climbing memes, you know, the kind of standard ones. You end up seeing a lot of the same kind of, or like people using the same clips. Like I've seen and you use this one too, the old Greg ones popped back up.
I love
which that show like was like a meme. I mean, a decade ago, I think it's from an old, No,
a decade ago, I was quoting old Greg. And so it like popped into my feed and I immediately just stopped what I was doing to film it.
So there's all those things. But then I'm also watching you, you know, become serious and evolve as a climber. And that's, for me, the hook. Like, okay, so let me forget about this social media. What is she doing as a climber? It's still important to me, you know, to watch people who are motivated to, you know, to try different things and to go on adventures elsewhere. And you know, while I'll skip everybody else, that's when I'm hooked. And I've watched you. And I want to talk a little bit about a place as a jumping off point to talk about you as a climber, which is this climb once upon a time in the Southwest that you did in the UK, E9 6C, which I have no idea still what that means. I know that it's just hard and scary. Well, it's probably good you didn't know, right?
Yeah, no, it was better, I think.
But yeah, and the reason I want to bring that up is because there's this story around it, and I don't know if it's true, but I think it sort of is, based on even what you've talked about, is like going over there as a pretty novice trad climber as far as placing gear, and then hooking up with Tom Randall and his crew, and then, you know, all of a sudden doing this, like, you know, fairly good level test piece. There seems to be this narrative there where you just like did a crash course and then fired this route. And it's probably not as simple as that, but I think it's a good place to talk about who you were before that. And then, you know, a launching point for maybe what you're becoming as a climber.
Yeah. Oh, it was just, I feel like the most random series of events, but I travel a lot, which you know on my Instagram, and I was traveling through the UK, and I realized that there were no hostels available for when I wanted to film with Tom. Sidebar, like that's another beautiful thing about the internet, you know, and having an Instagram. I was just like, oh, like maybe I can do a YouTube collaboration with the Wide Boys. Like I'll just reach out and see. And everyone's so welcoming. And they're like, yeah, no, that'll be awesome. So I had reached out to Tom earlier.
Well, those guys in particular, let's face it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll do,
Or
they
at
were
least
like,
Tom anyway. Yeah.
Yeah, he was so psyched. He was like, yeah, like let's do this. And so I was like, okay. And there were no hostels available. So I kind of was like, okay, well, either I just move along because there's nowhere to stay, or I just like, you know, do the thing. And I asked Tom if I can stay with him or a friend or something. And of course, these are kind of, I wouldn't say like idols, but you know, I've looked up to people like Tom and Pete in the community just because they've done the thing that I'm trying to do. And so I was like, okay, can I stay at your house? And he was like, that's totally fine. We have a spare bedroom. And then I kind of didn't leave for like a month and a half or so because he was like, okay, that was super fun. Like, what are you doing now? And I'm like, I don't know. He's like, do you want to come to my project, which was Once Upon a Time in the Southwest? And I was like, you know what? Like, I'll come and see because it looks like a beautiful place to just exist. But I'm not going to hop on, probably. You know, like, this is just some massive climb that I have no business being on. And he was like, it'll be a top rope, it'll be fine. And I just totally hesitantly went into that experience. And I just got on the wall and I was like, oh, this is amazing. This is really, really cool. And it's not as hard. Well, maybe not that it's not as hard, but maybe I was just more capable than I had anticipated. And so then I just stayed and we just projected this climb together. And yeah, I really didn't know much about trad climbing. I had led some 5.9s before going to the UK, but some Yosemite 5.9s. So like, of course it sounds really intense, like from 5.9 to E9, but it's like, okay, Yosemite 5.9s are kind of like 5.11s sometimes. And I just kind of decided not to care about the fact that I felt like such a small little person next to all of these professional climbers who happened to be, you know, surrounding me and trying the same things and projecting the same things that I was. Yeah.
So that whole 5.9 to E9 is true.
Yeah.
I read a little comment about that just a few minutes ago on Reddit. I was like, okay, well, that can't be true, but it sounds like it was true.
Yeah. I had been like following a lot of climbs, so I had followed some like harder things, but leading, I had done just a handful of leads. That was like one of my first main leads. It was my first real lead above 5.9. So yeah. I'm
trying to figure it out. Do you know what it's rated? In Yosemite.
In Yosemite, yeah, it's like a 513/+ R. Yeah.
That has to be some sort of like world record leap. That it has to be. Because you did do it in the end, right? You didn't just top rope it.
No, I sent it on lead. Yeah. I know, it's awesome. Ridiculous. Like I don't know. Like the thing is, it was so not on my radar, and it was, you know, like it was just so outrageous and absurd that it just didn't matter that I was trying it. I was just like laughing the whole time. I was like, this is so ridiculous. And then it like came to this point where I was like, oh my God, like I could do this. And then it became serious for maybe like the last 2 days or something, but the whole time I was just laughing and being like, this is so fun, like this is so non-consequential, I'm just hanging out with people and top roping. And then I sent it on top rope, and then I sent it on top rope with gear, and then all of a sudden the ropes were taken away and it was like, lead it.
Right.
Yeah.
So you head pointed it.
Yeah, I head pointed it, exactly. So, it's not
so
like,
what about that part of it
or anything like that? I was practicing.
No, it's fine. I knew that. I mean, but it doesn't matter. I mean, but when you switched it up, like, what about if you were never really into trad up to that point, then you probably weren't that into really scary climbing either. So what about when the rope disappeared? Like, what was your mindset? Did you have it on lock enough that you were comfortable, or did you get gripped?
No, that was one of the most uncomfortable climbs of my life. I did it third go, and I was like terrified.
I mean, let me go back just to get people involved. Like, what are the potential like whippers you're going to take on this thing? And is it's not an X route necessarily.
No.
Although an R can always, result in some But yeah, I mean, what was the potential like length of whippers in falling off the hard climbing and stuff like that? Oh my gosh.
So there's like one, I guess, notorious area on the climb. We call it the runnel. And it is just the biggest run out I've ever done on small, thin holds that could break at any moment because it's by like a seashore, sea cliff. And that's kind of the battle you're doing as well, because not only is the gear really spread apart in this specific area, there's no gear, but throughout the climb the gear is pretty spread apart, but it's also that you're on this like fickle rock face, and holds break off all the time. Like we changed the crux, like the crux just broke on us, and then same with some of the upper holds. And so you're kind of just tackling this idea that anything could break at any point, but I'm still gonna do it. And the gear was all micro gear. So even after a big run out, you know, you had really small RPs going into holds in rock that could break. So I think it can be deceiving when you see a video and it's like, well, there's a lot of gear at the beginning. And I'm like, yeah, but I trusted maybe 3 of those pieces. And then there was no gear. And then there were micro RPs. So I guess the fall potential was pretty big because it was a 50-meter cliff. A 50-meter slab, actually. So a lot of the time you're just smearing. And the fall, I mean, it would have been huge. I don't think you would have decked. I would have decked at the top of the runnel if the gear held at the bottom of the runnel. But it's like a good 10-meter section maybe. And so imagine just falling on that. But then it's the gear thing, right? Because it could fall out. And especially if you have never placed like half of those sizes, because on 5.9s, you're not placing micro RPs. So it was the first time I'd placed any of these holds, and I had never fallen on gear before. So I didn't really know if what I was doing would be safe. But that's when it, like the reason I did it and the reason I felt confident to do it was because Tom went back up. Like every time I tried it on top rope and set the gear, he would say, okay, these all look good, or like, okay, this one's gonna hold, this one was bad. And I would just slowly learn how to place these very specific gear placements.
I love this story. It's so contradictory to the era I came from, where I was supposed to climb for several years without ever falling on gear, and do 100 5/8 and then do 100 5/9s, and then it was such this different world, which is, you're not the first person to blow that apart. It's just been blown apart, especially by gyms. But that's an amazing story. And so when you said it was the third try, you mean on lead?
Yeah.
What did you just what happened on the other tries? Did you take whips, or were you just too nervy and hung, or what?
So it was the third try of that day and my 4th lead go, actually.
Okay.
The day before, or the trip before, I guess, the time before, Tom and I had used different gear for the climb, just because, everyone climbs differently, and maybe one gear placement or 2 were different because of how we were climbing the route. And so I remember the first time I fell, I had to basically just climb down and come down because I had forgot to rack my gear and I had Tom's gear. And I was like, oh my God, I don't know what to do with this. Like, I don't know where to put this and it won't fit where I need it to. So I just kind of was like, I'm coming down. And I dropped the piece, actually. I dropped Tom's piece that I wasn't going to use. And I was a total mess and I just came down. And then I was like,
we're not going to count that one. That doesn't count.
It totally does. Yeah, because I kind of went down.
I'm officially saying that it does not count.
And then on that day, I took legit falls. I think one of those falls has made its way around the internet. It's been pretty reposted, I guess, on every site, it seems, just like me whipping. It was posted on climbing magazines, like Whipper of the Week and everything.
Okay.
And I fell actually on one of the pieces that I was most confident about placing. It was a number 1, like a Wild Country number 1 that I had wedged into this crack, and I was like, this is good, I can fall on this. And so I was just going up and I just took this huge whip, and that was my first fall. And then my second fall was at the crux. I fell on the smallest RP they have. It was a blind placement. This sounds like so much worse when I'm saying it out loud. I feel like it wasn't so bad. I was just in the moment, but you kind of in the middle of the crux, you can't see the gear placement, and you're leaning to the side, and you put this tiny one in where you can't see, and you tug it and you just hope it works. And then what I do is I kind of do a double clutch dyno on a slab, and then you can check the gear to make sure it's good. But as I was dynoing, I fell and it was really smooth and the gear actually held. So the third time I sent that day. So those were like my falls.
That's pretty intense. It's pretty intense. This is the same climb that kind of, is a big part of Hazel's story too, I believe. Was she the first woman to do it?
Yeah.
I can't remember.
She was the first woman to do E9, the British grade of E9 as well, on that climb.
Cool. Right. So, but it's funny that something you went back to about holds breaking. It's like, it's so freaking British or UK to have a classic route that's like crumbly.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like, usually if it's like classic, it's like, okay, the thing's bullet, it's like so bullet, like, and here's a classic route, a storied route that's just like falling apart still.
And she broke a hold on her, like they did a real rock about her, and she literally broke a hold. Yeah, if you remember that. And that's like, yeah, no, totally. That just still happens. Yeah. That's
classic. And so tell me a little bit about, like, aside from, being brought into the bosom of the Wide Boys, what did you feel about the scene over there, having come from the States? And it seems like, I don't know, you had been up in 10 sleep or something forever. And like, I don't know if that's the actual timeline, but I can imagine that going from there to a place like that is like, it's diametrically opposed in a lot of ways.
No, totally.
So what was the scene like? How was it for you?
Yeah, it was, well, it was very different because I don't know how many people have climbed at 10 sleep, but it's a really comfy place. Like the bolts are pretty nicely spaced, and it's
modern.
Climbing. Yeah, exactly. And it's sport climbing. So you're just like clipping draws, clipping bolts. I actually felt super confident at 10 sleep because I was like, wow, like this is great. I don't feel scared. And then immediately after I go to the UK and I'm like, wow, I am constantly scared. Not on top rope, actually. I'm pretty good on top rope. I'm not so scared of that. Although the exposure on Once Upon a Time was really intense, and it did take some getting used to because you kind of get vertigo up there. It's like you have the waves crashing, and even on top rope, you're kind of just like, whoa, I'm really high up. But I would say the scene was, I don't know. I spent a lot of time with like Tom and other friends who came through, and everyone was super nice. And it was more like, I don't want to say serious because Tom is super goofy, if you know Tom, and I'm really goofy, but it was also like there was some level of seriousness to what we were doing that was like, okay, this is actually kind of dangerous. And we kind of all understood that. Whereas in 10 Sleep, it kind of felt like this playground. But it was still goofy and it was still fun. And I think they're all just so badass. They're just like, oh yeah, like we're gonna try to find the direct start, or we're gonna do the walk of life to the right. I think Hazel was there as well trying that, and it was just like a really cool try hard atmosphere where people were laughing but also really wanted to do this and to try hard.
I mean, one of the hallmarks of at least Pete and Tom that I've always admired is just that. Actually, even going back to what we were talking about with social media, like I'm not interested in the climber who's just goofing off all the time. And even if they are popular, like
sure,
I want to feel that like intensity at times. And I think one of the things I admire about those guys is they do both. And it's like, yeah, they seem like these goofy guys that put together these ridiculous videos, but then you look at their resume and especially when I was talking to Pete, I was just like, good Lord, like, you at some point, like put that goofiness aside and put the hammer down frequently on stuff that's like scary, hard, so it's an admirable quality to do both. Like the brooding Dark Lord kind of climber isn't that interesting to me either. I want like both, a little bit.
Yeah, I feel like it speaks to the human experience. I don't know. I feel like it would be pretty intense and depressing to just be so serious all the time. I don't think I would thrive under an atmosphere like that. But at the same time, like, you're right, you can't just be goofy and then expect to turn around and climb this really intense, dangerous, risky climb that takes all of your physical and mental effort. So I think, just like being able to flip-flop is something that I've been doing a lot. And I think that's really important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a Basque friend who's he climbs in the creek, or used to climb in the creek like more than I did actually for a lot of years. And one time he's asking, he's like, what's the deal with the funny hats? And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, I don't know. It seems like all these climbers like in Indian Creek are always climbing in funny hats. And I was like, and basically it was that of like, you know, it's always this kind of roving party there, you know, and like a lot of people aren't taking it very seriously. And he's like you know, he's serious about his climbing, you know. And it was just kind of a funny statement because I was like, yeah, I do see a lot of wigs and costumes and funny hats down there, you know, like it's like, when are you going to take your funny hat off and like try something really hard? Well, but anyhow,
there's like the flip side of that too, right? Where it's like wear the funny hat and still send hard, which I really love playing with that. I don't know if you saw, but like I did this project in 10 Sleep and I put on like big old space buns, like just these huge, ridiculous buns that were like spacey and
like Princess Leia type style.
And I was like, time to go, time to send. Right. And then it got serious and I'm still wearing these buns and I'm just like, you know what, I'm just pushing through. I thought it was hilarious. I was like, this is the video I'm going to make. I'm going to make a video where I'm wearing these ridiculous space buns. And that's exactly what I did.
Well, I guess my point is that you never get to the be able to send part if all you ever do is the ridiculous part. And so it's like, the guys and the gals and people like you know, that are like doing both, it's because somewhere at some point you know, those guys were in the dungeon, like literally in the dungeon, you know, doing their thing to like a level of pain tolerance that I have no idea about. So it's like, you know, that's kind of the thing. And so, you know, I admire that too. Like, be goofy, but it's after you put all the time in, you know.
Totally. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, Tom and Pete do that well.
Yeah. So let's quit talking about those guys because we're here to talk about you. Sorry, this is our little love letter to them.
I know. It'll just rename the podcast or the title of this episode.
Let's move on. So, but let's move back then. So again, you kind of make this enormous transition. Apparently you fall in love with slabs at some point, but we'll get to that in a second too. But yeah, so tell me a little bit about who you were, you know, before this trip, because this happens to a lot of climbers where they have a trip. I think that, you know, even if at the time it doesn't stand out, later on it can really stand out in their lives and their evolution as a climber. And I feel like this trip we're talking about is probably one of those. You went a bunch of other places too, which we can get to. But what about who you were before that transition? Like, what kind of climber were you, let's say in the couple years before this last season?
Yeah, well, always a slab climber. I have loved slabs since day one. I don't know why. I was just like, this is awesome. And so I started bouldering outside a lot, and I would really gravitate to highball slabs. Like my first V1 through 5, I want to say, were all highball slabs. V1, V2, V3, V4, V5.
Right.
And then
what's your locale here that you're accessing this kind of climbing?
Well, where I am now, actually near my parents' house. I'm in Southern California. So I was going to Black Mountain and Joshua Tree mainly. I mean, that's what's available, especially if you know Joshua Tree. Like all of these climbs, you're just like, oh, right. Like they're just so tall, and a lot of them are slabs. If you choose the slabs, they have them. And so this was kind of like right away I knew this was going to be something I love to do. And then I discovered Bishop a few years later, and I was like, oh my gosh, more tall slabs. And I just really loved all of that, all bouldering. And I guess 2 years, maybe a little bit longer now, like 2.5 years ago, I moved to Catalunya to try to just kind of travel, do the thing I've always wanted to do, which was be away from home, be an adult in the city, you know, like this coming of age story. And I was like, I have a job out there. I'm going to do that, like teach English and learn how to sport climb. So I started sport climbing, 2.5 years ago, which was a total pivot from bouldering. And I feel like before this trip, I was kind of in this exploratory mindset where I was going to try other things, like other than slab boulders and vertical boulders. I was like, okay, I'm just going to just expand. Obviously, I wanted to climb hard. I wanted to try hard. I have that kind of like passion, and that hasn't gone away. But it was more like, okay, I want to try to do more overhung climbs. And then through bouldering, I want to do that in sport climbing. What's trad climbing? And I just had all of these things I wanted to do. And I totally just forgot about grade chasing for a second and just started learning. And that's kind of where I was when I left to the UK. I was just like, okay, let's do trad. Like, sure. And so I hadn't really climbed indoors for a while, and I totally was just like outdoor bumming and fan lifing and trying new things and getting shut down, like so shut down.
Where were you in Catalunya? More or less.
Yeah, I lived in Barcelona for 6 months.
Oh, cool.
And then I would travel kind of around there. And then I ended up in a small town called Goldenarco. So it's
near what climate?
It's near Oliana.
Okay,
yeah.
Cool. Yeah, that's more how we talk about countries.
So a little
towns,
town.
Whatever, those are towns.
But a lot of climbing nearby. Like it's not just Oliana. There's hundreds of crags. It's actually overwhelming.
That's awesome that you did that. Especially like not being much of a sport climber. It's usually a destination after you've cut your teeth elsewhere. So that's pretty awesome. But it's funny because you're talking about a type of climbing where I am actually now seeing these building blocks up to something like Once Upon a Time in the Southwest. Because aside from the gear, if you're highball bouldering, you've got a head, and you can hold on to small holds, and you can stand on your feet, and so it's funny. And then thinking about Joshua Tree, because it's like, if you're out slab climbing in Joshua Tree, those have a very frequent tendency to be extremely run out as well, because of the way they were bolted when they were bolted, often on lead, or with an eye towards making them a little bit scary on purpose. So now I'm seeing more of this building block of like not just like some knucklehead, like 5'9" climber working themselves up to that.
That's like,
I mean, not as an insult, but as more of like, I think it makes a little more sense now,
Yeah, that's the funny thing though, like the narrative, because it sounds really cool and like it's true to a certain extent. Like, okay, she came from 5'9" trad to this, but people don't realize that I've really been in this game for a while. And you can ask like other people, maybe 8 years isn't a long time, but for me, I mean, like that's a lot of my life. And I've been like attacking. I'm a really intense person. I think like a lot of climbers or outdoor enthusiasts, there's just like this addictive personality trait. And so I've been just going. Like I said, my first V1 was this highball V1. Like that's not, I feel like it's just a little bit crazy maybe. And then you have this highball bouldering and my love for slabs and exactly going to places that are notoriously scary, even for bouldering. And then because I like to jump into the deep end, I just moved to Oliana basically. And that was my first sport climb. It was this 8A plus in Oliana. It was like the first climb that I considered something I had sent, because before I had just done a handful of climbs and I didn't really understand the concept of like not falling. I was like, okay, let's just get to the chains. I was like really not a sport climber. And so when I went to Oliana, it's like, okay, the rules are you start at the start, you finish at the finish, you don't fall in between. And I was like, oh, wow, okay. And so I'm doing this at Oliana. And I think it's a really funny story because it kind of mirrors my trad story in a way. I like showed up with all this shiny gear, right? So everyone knows you're new. And then all my draws, I'd put them on backwards, like just upside down, because I didn't know which side to put into the bolt and which side to, do you know what I'm talking about? Like they were just all upside down.
Your rope beaners on the draw or on the bolt, and your ropes through the bolt side.
So I did that.
I mean, that's not a fatal error anyway.
It's not bad, but and then I had a bunch of belay certification tags because I was so proud that I knew how to belay. And I showed up with all of this, and one of the strongest climbers in the world came up to me, and I didn't know at the time that she was. So she was like, hi, I just don't want you to go up the wall and put the draws on backwards. And also, you don't need those belay tags. And she's like, you might want to take those off. And I was like, oh my gosh, I feel so embarrassed. And I just like quickly took them off. But some of them were like cinched on, like those hardware cinched
with the zip tie. Yeah. So you needed like at least like a pair of scissors or something.
It's so embarrassing. But I didn't even know it. I just showed up already.
Who was it?
I was like, who wants to belay me? I can belay. Look.
Who was trying to help you?
This was Anak Verhoeven. Oh. Yeah, we're still friends. We still like talk, like, how are you? Like, how's Oliana? And her dad like really helped me not look so much like a noob. But yeah.
All right.
So I feel like that's my personality trait. And then flash forward, and of course I'm gonna hop on some hard trad.
What's funny is, this will sort of start stereotypical, but I feel like that a woman climber like her is gonna like go out of her way to help another woman climber like that. And I think like if I had been you, like the dudes would have just like not even like come anywhere near me or like helped in any way, shape, or form, or just been like, God, this American is fucked. Like, why? Like, you know what I mean? Like, I think you benefited there from being a woman and having this other woman at the crag of like, I need to help this girl immediately.
That's funny to say that. I feel like that ties into this bigger picture where like we have to have each other's backs, just because there aren't many of us, and especially there, like it's a pretty intimidating crag. I don't know like if you've been there or how many viewers have been, but it's like you hike up and it's just just the strongest climbers you've ever seen in your life, all next to each other, all climbing.
Yeah, because they're all crammed into the middle of it.
Yeah,
on like,
they're all like there.
Like 20 meters wide of a wall that's got like all the hardest climbing around on it, like La Dura and 50 other ones. But because when you say that, it's funny because I went there with a friend, a local, the same guy that made the hat comment in Indian Creek, but who's climbed a bunch of those routes. But we were kind of in a hurry, and so I just kind of wanted to see it because we were around, and we climbed like the two. I always call myself a fringe dweller when I'm on these caves because I'll like go out to the edge of the cave where it's not so steep. Climb those routes. Like all over the world, that's basically how it works. And so I like climbed the two like complete grease fest, like 512 warm-ups on either side of the frickin' main part. And then we bailed to a different crag that
those are nice had just climbs. Been developed. So. the classic Oleana warm-ups.
Yeah. So anyway, but it's just funny because I was like, I don't have time for the middle. I'm out of here.
Oh my God. The middle was scary. I was a little on the side. I wasn't in the middle, but I was adjacent. I was like, oh wow, like that's awesome.
Yeah, that's super cool.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, so there's like an evolution. So let's go to the other side now, where you are now. You've learned how to play some gear, apparently.
Kind of.
And so what do you suppose is like? I mean, you're still going to be after slabs. Like, what do you see your evolution? Not what you want to do specifically, like telling me your projects, but as a climber, like what's your sort of next step? You feel like as you evolve.
How I mentioned, I was in this learning phase before, like leading up to Once Upon a Time, and I feel like I'm now in this mental state where I really want to push it and see what happens if I start training, if I start regularly climbing. It's kind of like, it's hard to explain because I don't want it to come across like that I'm not climbing all the time, because I've really molded my lifestyle in order to be able to climb a lot. But in reality, when you're traveling all of the time, or you're just projecting one or two things, like you're just not training. It's just not the same. It's not systematic. And so I've been doing this for years, and although I feel like I'm getting better, I feel like I would really benefit from some training. So these last few months, I've kind of just been home pretending to be a normal human with like a day job. And then I've been training after. And I think my next travels are just going to focus on seeing what I can do physically and trying to keep up with that training, and pursuing other hard slabs and vertical climbs, seeing where that goes. At the same time, I do want to keep exploring and trying other types of climbing, like, who knows, crack climbing, off-width, things like that. But I'm really excited to just push myself physically, because I've done a lot of that whole exploration thing, and now I was like pushing myself mentally, and I'm like, okay, I'm ready to like see how hard I can go. Yeah, that's kind of next.
Yeah, I mean, it's also sort of this old style attitude to think that just because you're climbing all the time, you're going to just incrementally get better and stronger, and because that's, again, pre-training, only like a very elite few were training when I started climbing, and yeah, it was just this idea that if I climb all the time, I'll just slowly get better, but I mean, we're in a new paradigm, especially if someone who's up towards the limit of grades. I mean, you've climbed 514, you've climbed a lot of 513, like you're up there where it's like, yeah, you can't just pretend anymore and think you're just going to get better. You know what I mean?
I feel like I've kind of gotten to a point, at least for now, where I'm like, okay, this is where not training took me, which is like pretty cool. I was really excited, and I've done like some training here and there, but never more than like a week or two. So it's nice.
Well, it's to be honest with you, it's very impressive, and it's a lot of natural talent and dedication to say that, to be like, look, I mean, because it's not like you're some slouch. Like, you got a long ways. And I think it's such a great attitude to now sort of like, slather some training on the top of it and see what happens. As long as, you don't take all the fun out of it too, because that other lifestyle is really fun, and just being like, I'm going to try this and I'm going to try this and then I'm going to move on. And like, that's a really fun lifestyle. But I also think that like, if you're a serious person, there's a point at which you can kind of end up just spinning your wheels in that world,
I think there's a place for both. And I'm not trying to eradicate one over the other. I'm just like really excited to be putting this in to my routine. I want to do it like maybe 6 months out of the year or something, like 6 months training, 6 months travel and fun. I don't know how that's going to work. I don't know like what ratios and when, like maybe 3 months at a time or something like that. But I'm just like really excited to do that because I feel like it's been a long time coming, but I never really wanted to train because I was really nervous that was not like, I wasn't going to be good. Like, it's like one of those things where you have to be like accepting the fact that you're going 100% for something that you actually really care about. And like, what if I train and I'm just like still shit or something? And I feel like that's kind of in the back of my mind. I'm like, I'll just travel, I'll just have fun, whatever. But now I've kind of committed to believing that maybe I can be better. So it's like a new chapter, I feel like. And I think that comes with confidence, and maybe the confidence of sending things like the 5-14 and 10 sleep or Once Upon a Time, where I'm like, okay, maybe I can do this. Maybe this is something that I can pursue without the fear of failure, because I'm not going to fail, just because how can you if you're having fun and trying hard? So it's just like a new frame of mind that I'm trying to really solidify. Yeah. I don't know if that makes any sense or if anyone else is in the same boat, but I was like terrified to just like put 100% of me into this.
It makes complete sense. Everything that you're saying makes sense. And it also, like, I feel like there's a lot of chatter on both sides. There's a lot of chatter that goes with like, you can't be a good climber if you don't train. And what are these people doing? Like wasting their time and wearing funny hats and things like that. And then the other chatter is like, you're going to ruin the soul of climbing by, projecting, and like, why take all the fun out of it? And so, and I feel like you probably have feet in both of those camps, but yeah, it's about a little bit of a balance. But I'm always surprised at how like a real dyed in the wool kind of like, road dog sort of climber can get like really pissy about people who train. You know what I mean? Like as if it's like a really bad thing.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? You know what I'm talking about?
It's totally like, okay, when I was at university and studying, right? I would like hear this all the time. It would be, oh my gosh, like I didn't even study and I still got an A or something. And you're just like, it's that desire to be just effortlessly good at things, I think. Mm-hmm. And it's like, there's some esteem that comes with it being like, I don't even train and I could climb XYZ, whatever that means. And like, that's why when I say this, it's really hard to say, because I don't want to mislead people into thinking like she doesn't do anything. And then all of a sudden she laughs a little, she climbs 514 and she comes back. It's not like that. Like when I say I'm not training, I mean, I'm not doing some schedule on a hangboard. I'm not climbing indoors, but like, I'm trying really hard all the time, and it might as well be training, but it's outside, but it's like not training. And it's just like hard to get across both ideas where it's like, okay, I'm trying hard, I'm outside, I'm not just off the couch strong. But at the same time, like I do think having a training schedule is going to help a lot. And it's like balancing those two ideas. But I've definitely heard that, just like, I just climb and that's better somehow. And it's like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, it's also like it's also a lifestyle choice. It doesn't always work. Like if I didn't actively train because of the way my life is, like I'd be useless on the rock. So I'm at a point in my life, not just age wise, but also family style, that I got to do it or I'm giving up, It's kind of like, I mean, that's the thing. Anyhow, but go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say it's such a privilege to be able to climb outside all the time. And like, I've definitely made it so all of my jobs are remote and like my life is for climbing. And if you don't totally reorganize your life, that's so hard to do. I don't know. I feel like that's just kind of wild to expect just anyone to drop everything and only climb.
Let me pivot a little bit away from your climbing. and talk about you as sort of a person in the climbing space. And I wanted to ask you a little bit about being a woman in the climbing space, especially traveling as much as you do, introducing yourself to new groups and finding your way around the country and around the world. So the Me Too movement started and is ongoing. And one thing I hear from women a lot of times is this idea that there's this sort of like kind of subliminal or constant like minor threat out there in the climbing world, whether it's in the gym or whether it's in the space at a climbing cliff. You know, I hear stories about kind of dudes like pushing their way into things and sort of getting in women's faces occasionally. And the thing is that within my circle of female climbing friends, I've talked to them and they don't necessarily see it the way it seems to be being talked about online or in these stories that I've heard. They've been around a long time and a lot of them are like, no, I've never really felt that. What is your sort of feeling about being a woman in this space, especially as you've gotten into climbing hard? I think that puts you in a little bit of a smaller group and interfacing maybe with people at the cliffs a little bit differently. Do you have anything to say about what it's like to be a woman out on the road in the climbing space and how you've felt about your, I think, security and safety out there in that world?
Yeah, well, I think just to start the conversation, it is like pretty intersectional and dependent on where you are if you are experiencing certain degrees of sexism where you climb. So I think it depends on a lot of things. It depends on, and not that it should, but it just does because this is the world we live in. It depends on what you're wearing. It depends on how you're presenting. It depends on, are you in a more conservative area or is it more liberal? Do you choose to adhere to feminine standards like shaving your armpits or not? How much do you deviate from the norm of femininity that we have given ourselves in our culture and in the culture that you're specifically climbing within? So if your friends haven't experienced the same degree maybe as other women are talking about, I would urge you to not think that that is a universal experience or it's an outlier. I would say that everyone's experience is going to just be different based on what they're doing and how they are. So, because I get so many comments about this, and it's like, well, I don't experience that. And I know that's not like you weren't being aggressive or attacking in that way, but I do get a lot of aggressive comments like, I don't see this. This is not what I experience. Therefore, you're lying, or something that really like discredits my experience or gaslights me. And it's like, okay, this is like such an individual experience that I share with a lot of women. So it's like individual, but also communal. My own experience hasn't been great to start off with. I live in a really conservative community and I experienced sexism daily at my climbing gym. And I've noticed that as I've gotten to a level that's more maybe intimidating, might be the right word. Like, you know, you go into a gym and it's just like, I feel pretty confident that I can climb the harder grades. And it's just like people seem to be more distant when I'm climbing there. You know, like I don't get as many people trying to spray me with beta, but maybe that's because I just kind of come in and do my own thing now. And so let's see, let me circle back. I guess it really depends. I haven't noticed it as much in the outdoor community just because when I'm climbing these days, I climb with a select number of people. And usually we're off doing some random difficult climb in the middle of nowhere. And I'm not going to experience sexism or any kind of discomfort because I know who I'm climbing with and I'm choosing my climbing partners based on liking them. You know, I'm like, oh, I like to hang out with you. This is fine. And there's no one else that's going to be here. But let's say I go to a random town, maybe it's a little more conservative. I come in with my dyed bright hair. I'm wearing like sparkly makeup and I have my nails done and I'm climbing. Almost undoubtedly, there's going to be some guy in rental shoes that makes some comment that makes me feel like shit. And it just happened the other day. Like I was like warming up on like a V4 and this group of guys was to the right and they're like, dude, if she can do it, you can do it. Just get on there. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like that's crazy. Like it's not even directed towards me half the time. I'm just like, are we really thinking that way? You know, because that just like it just has so many implications. And then like I think I was with friends when I sent my first, I sent my first V10. It was a few years ago. It's gotten since downgraded to V9. So anyways, it was my first 10 at the time. And I remember the first thing I heard at the top was the conversation from guys I didn't know at the bottom. And one of them said, "Oh, dude, did she do it from the start?" And then the guy was like, "I don't know, but regardless, she did it the girl way, so it's not going to count." And I was just like, like, oh my gosh. So like immediately when I sent it, that was what I heard. So like, yeah, it's just rough. It's just like a rough time.
What does it mean?
So I guess like,
was there like,
so I put my like foot above my head because I'm super flexible, and I did that to reach a hold. And I probably made it look pretty easy that way because I wasn't like doing it the way where you have to like grab your hands and your feet and just like and dynamically burl out to like some hold. I just like put my foot where it's probably pretty hard for normal people to put their foot there, but I'm super flexible. So I just kind of like reached into the splits, put my foot there, drop kneed it, grabbed the crimp, and then continued. And I think that somehow discounted my entire climb in their eyes.
All right. Does it pollute your feelings about the climbing community? Does it, like, how does it sort of make you feel about our community that, you know, I'll admit I can sort of wax poetic about, but when I'm doing that, it's interesting to hear you say that like this sort of gym kind of scene seems to be, at least for you, and again, this is your experience, so not to discount other people's experience, but what you're saying is that it seems to be, you know, quite problematic. And when I talk about like the climbing community, as this old school person, I don't even count that. I don't even count gyms as part of it.
Totally,
which is probably gonna get me some mean mail, but like I'm not, you know, it's like whatever community there is in some gym, I'm like, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about what happens out at the cliffs. But I know that I'm sort of naive about it, which is why I'm talking to you about it. And while I do wax poetic about like how great the climbing community is, I'm not stupid enough to think that there aren't shitty people within our outdoor climbing community. So is this enough for you to be occasionally soured on it, or are you? I mean, how do you sort of internalize the frequency at which these kind of things happen?
Yeah, I mean, like, not to paint it the wrong way, I really love the climbing community. I really love it. It's part of the reason I climb is the social element. They're all so kind and nice. And what I'm realizing is a lot of these comments come from people who are newer to the game or people who have been around a really long time and are kind of like not excited about the change that's happening. It's kind of like this weird split that I've personally noticed, especially outside. That's what it happens to be. And I wouldn't say I get disillusioned. I think sometimes it can be extra potent on Instagram because I'll get a lot of messages that might be, well, they're just mean. I get mean, sexist comments all of the time on Instagram, but it's a huge audience now that I'm reaching to. And I'm not just saying like my followers, it's just whoever happens to come across my videos, my reels, which are also being presented to people who don't climb. So I get like the real world sometimes on all of the platforms. And I think that's honestly the worst bit of it. I'm not disillusioned at all, again, about the climbing community, but it does make me step back and be like, okay, there is some work to be done. And I just get to see a lot of the negative, and it just sticks in my brain pretty easily because it's hard to forget nasty comments. So it's a weird mix because like in real life, I'm not getting so many nasty comments anymore. And I know how to deal with them. I kind of talk back and just make sure they know that it's not okay. And I'll just be like that, like, hey, what you said is not okay. And then people usually are just like, just like, okay. And I'll be like, yeah, like that kind of offended me. Just let them know and then move on, right? But online, it's a little bit trickier. Yeah.
Well, I think that's also, I mean, you know, I don't discount the idea that you confronting someone about something they said in person is, you know, it's a courageous thing because it can have some risk to it, depending on where you are, what the audience is, you know. So it's like, I don't, you know, when people are like, well, you should just stand up for yourself. It's like, yeah, but I understand that it's not without it. I mean, as a guy to a guy, I would think twice, and because I'm not confrontational and I don't need something to go beyond. But I think in some ways, though, then when a woman does stand up like that, it can be a very quick, diffusing of it, because a guy like confronting another guy, that's like, we go into sort of lizard brain primal territory. Yeah. You know what I mean? But I don't discount the fact that if you do say something about something that offended you, you put yourself at a little bit of risk, and it's real.
It is. I mean, it is. And it's scary and it sucks. Like, there's no getting around that. It's just not a fun experience. And I'd rather not call people out. Like, I mean, internally, I'd rather not. But I just know from years of dealing with weird comments, and like even just like weird passive comments, like the one I had mentioned before, or comments like, yeah, but how much do you weigh? Or like little micro things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is,
small
it's
hands.
Just like not something.
Those holds seem big because you have small hands.
Yeah, exactly. Like, oh, like, yeah, but your hands are pretty small and you're like really flexible and you weigh a little bit. And I'm like, yeah, like that's part of like how I climb. Like, what are you?
The cards I was dealt. Like, I'm like, that's what I got.
You have testosterone and muscles.
Testosterone and big muscles. So yeah, exactly.
Are we just stating the obvious? Like, of course I weigh less than you. Like, that's like, that comes at like with the fact that I don't gain muscle very fast at all. And like, I mean, it's so person to person. And so I've found that over the years, I've gained a lot of, I want to say confidence is the right word here, in dealing with people and not being scared about that. It was harder when I moved to Spain because I had to do it in Spanish. But I still like, I feel like it's still important to convey. And I've definitely been working on that. And I think it's better because it comes with educating. But I don't think that everyone needs to. It's like one of those things, like, don't let the burden of education be on the minority, which in this case, I'm talking about women generally. But at the same time, if I can, I will. And I'll step in for other women too. I do it all the time. I think some guy asked like a girl, like a 14-year-old girl, how much she weighed. And I just like came storming down the gym from the other side of the gym. I was like, hey, don't ask her that. And I was like, you don't have to answer that. And I was like mitigating the situation. I'm like, that's so rude. She's like 14 or 12 or like she was little. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this grown man is asking a little girl what she weighs as if it's going to help him. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we're, earlier in the podcast when we were talking about social media and you mentioned messages and having to answer messages, I remember I said, oh yeah, let's talk about that later. And that's part of what was in my mind, because I've said this many times, but the Enormocast has been surprisingly free of like absolute trolling and like anger and, people like really dissing me. If I go deep into Reddit or the old taco, super taco, there definitely are detractors, right? Everyone loves the show, loves the way I do it or anything like that. But no one's really ever attacked me personally as a stand-in for attacking the show or anything like that I can think of. But I know this goes on like so heavily with people who have put themselves in this position of being a personality online. And I don't know any even sort of prominent women climbers that don't receive the kind of messages you were just mentioning. I've been thinking about it because I don't see an analog for male climbers. Male climbers, like climbing ability can get attacked for sure.
Yeah.
Or, why is that guy sponsored, or that guy sucks,
Sure.
or like I heard he, bullshitted his way up that route, or, there's these attacks, but there's this like sexual and physical nature to the way women get attacked that men just don't. You compare two accounts online of two famous climbers and, like Sasha DeJulian to Andra, to some sort of analog to her. And there's no version of that men get. It's a whole, they get attacked for sure, but it's
the internet. Yeah. No one's safe.
but the attack on that part of a woman's, position or her, vulnerability is very unique. And it's, let's face it, it's coming from men. So it's something that I've been thinking about a lot. And I also have a lot of empathy for when I, see people who put themselves online like that. And it's such a, like your Instagram is fun. It's positive. You're never dissing anybody. It's goofy and all those sorts of things. And yet it still invites that. It's really outrageous and wild to me.
Yeah. It's just my existence. And that's it. Like, there's no Instagram that I could create looking the way I do where I don't receive that. It's just impossible. It's an impossible ask. So that's like one of the main things that I try to like remind myself, like, you know, like, it's just, I'm not going to be for everyone. And even if I am, like, it will not stop any of the negative comments that are targeting just my womanhood, like how I look, how I'm presenting myself. I remember I was doing this like hard 513, like notoriously stiff cave tufa 513, and I put in a knee bar, and my belayer was like, how secure are you there? And I was like, I'm pretty secure. He's like, okay, 1 sec, I'm just gonna take like a phone picture. You look really cool. Took a phone picture, and then I put it up because it looks really awesome, and it's like me in a knee bar. It's like my butt, but like because I'm doing a climbing move, and it's a really similar picture actually to one that Adam Ondra has posted in the past. And there was a whole Reddit forum about like, why is she getting so much hate for this when Ondra has the same picture? And it was like us side by side, which I'm flattered, right, to be considered part of that comparison. But it was like one of the first times where I was like, yeah, like that's really, really, it's just because of my body, or it's just because of how I look. It's because I'm a woman. That's it. That's the only difference here. And like, obviously, sure, Andra is probably doing something way harder, but in reality, like, it's hard enough to be in that, I think, that range where people can respect that you're doing something. Like, it was a similar vibe, and yet like all of this hate on my picture and none of the hate and only praise on Adam's. So yeah, it's been tough. Right. It's been a journey. Yeah.
I mean, you know, let me ask you this. It's been a journey is a telling statement. Like what kind of strategies have you put in place for yourself to, you know, stay away from the comments? Or do you just, you know, have you just found yourself in a mental place where you can dismiss them? Or do you talk to somebody when they get to you? Like what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean,
you're not just like sitting there just like, hoping this feeling goes away, you know? So
yeah.
It may be as advice to other women who are in this game or want to be in this game. Yeah,
I think the first failed attempt of curbing these comments were only posting pictures or videos where I was in turtlenecks. So there's like a section of time where I'm literally in turtlenecks, and like it's really hard to find. Like it was just like I was like, you know what? Like I'm so tired of being objectified. Like I'm literally just gonna be wearing baggy t-shirts and turtlenecks. Like I can't show my body and get respect. Like these are things I can't do together. And slowly I'm coming out of that where it's like, okay, I should be able to...
T-shirts,
yeah. No, it was really funny. I have like all these turtlenecks. Like,
baggy t-shirts. I'm going to make the next step to baggy t-shirts.
It's just like...
But then all your photos turned up on some turtleneck fetish site anyway, so it was like, whatever.
So like, I think part of it was just being like, okay, this is stupid because I should be able to wear whatever I want. And in understanding that I should be able to, there is a simultaneous understanding that doesn't mean that everyone's going to agree. And the best thing I've come up with is basically just delete, block, and move on. And that's it. And there are some comments recently. I don't know how much you've been following my Instagram, but I will post about it every now and then because I do want people to realize that this is happening and this is something that I actually have to deal with daily. I don't think a lot of people realize how bad it can be. I don't think a lot of people realize that I delete maybe up to 5 comments a day because they offend me and they're objectively offensive. I'm not deleting things like that I feel like are an opinion. I'm deleting things that are like, get off Instagram, you whore. And I'm like, well, you're going to get deleted. And I think just realizing that these people are really miserable and sad and they're hiding behind their anonymity, that word, right? But they're hiding behind their anonymity and it's such a reflection on them. And if you're happy with what you're doing, like that's what's important. And it's a process, like I said, because it's hard to not think about that. Especially people cut deep. Like you wouldn't expect it, but they just like go in and they'll comment about something really specific and personal. And I'm like, well, I was a little bit insecure about that already or something. And you just have to be like, no, like it's fine. Like just keep going, delete, block. And then
well, that's the thing is they're like professionals.
Oh my God.
They're not getting paid, but they're, the vulnerability thing is like they can, they're good at it, unfortunately. Like they're good at being evil. And it's interesting because it's evolving with this show. And again, I tend to talk to climbers of my generation or of the last 10, 15 years, sort of historical level kind of stuff. And more I've delved into this, a younger world, and it's made me realize just how bad it is, because it's easy to be like, oh yeah, lighten up. It's a couple things here and there, but everyone I talk to with a presence online as a climber, and the thing is that, like you were talking about the turtlenecks, is that you don't climb in turtlenecks. Like
I would put it on.
You know what I mean? And so it's like. And the thing is that there's this weird, it's kind of hard to explain without getting myself in trouble, but it's like within climbing, we admire the physical form. We admire the fitness of people, both men and women. And so, it's pretty easy to see how that can cross into, a fetishizing or a sexualizing of a person when, it's like, we are, it's part of our sport is to admire that in a person.
And we work so hard.
But it's also mature to be able to, it's also a sign of maturity to be able to divide the two and also not comment on the one, you know what I mean?
Sure.
But
yeah.
And I guess what I'm getting at is that in the last like year or two, I've really realized like, God, it's a real pain in the fucking ass for these women to be online. And again, like bringing people in from outside of climbing too. And, it's like, yeah, you can't do a knee bar without your butt sticking out. It just doesn't work that way.
Yeah, it's just not. Like,
yeah, so
I was mid-send, everyone. Like, this was like a real-time photo. I was like,
right.
And then like I got a lot of like, she's just posing, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like I have a video of the send, like this literally within the send.
Well, we've moved beyond just posing anyway. Like, who cares?
Also this, like, it's, I don't know, like I should be able to post a picture if my butt looks good or whatever in climbing, because like I've worked really hard to get to the point I am in climbing, and I'm like pretty proud of how capable my body is, and that it can like put my feet in this position to get that knee bar or whatever it might be. And that's like really exciting for me. And it's not until recently where I've actually felt comfortable again wearing like tank tops and racerbacks and things like that, because I was like, okay, like maybe it's okay if I'm wearing a sports bra. I don't know. Like, let's try this out.
Well, and the fact that you even have to make those calculations is so, it's just so part of the whole operation of again, like trying to attack a person's vulnerability. But I mean, in all honesty, like that would have been an interesting niche for you to be the turtleneck climber.
I still wear them when it's cold, and they're pretty cool.
It's
like
cool patterns. It's like 90 degrees in rifle, and you're like turtlenecking it.
Yeah.
The girl who climbs slabs and turtlenecks. I mean, that's a niche that's like pretty wide open right now.
Yeah, I feel like no one's taken that. No one's really taken the slab niche yet either. So
actually, that's funny you say that, because you have merch, and you have around slabs are sexy, right? And the slab climbing thing. And look, let me tell you something. I was like, okay, that's her thing. Like, freaking off-widths are used up. About 10 years ago, like off-widths got like cool again, and there's all these three people who are like, off-widths are my thing. I'm like, she just found this thing that no one else likes, and she's like adopted it.
It's my baby.
Her thing. But now we talked, I'm like, okay, no, she's got this literal like background in slab climbing. Like, it's totally legit.
No,
like,
it's not just a thing. I mean, like, I don't know, maybe I'll ask you to delete this later, but they call me the slab queen at home, at my home gyms. And they have, since I started climbing there, they were like, the slab queen. And that's what my nickname is. And it has been since before I was sponsored, before anything. That's how I got sponsored. I climbed all the hardest slabs at my home gym with broken shoes because I couldn't afford new shoes. And my friend was like, what are you doing? Did you just climb all my climbs? He was the head setter at the gym. And those shoes, and he grabbed them, and he was disgusted and offended and all of that. And then the next thing I know, Evolve asked me to go to their warehouse and pick out some shoes so I can climb slabs.
Right.
So it's not like from nowhere. It's been in my bio since I've started the Instagram thing, but I feel like I really pushed it recently because I was like, why does no one else like this? I was so confused. I was like, maybe I should just like stir the pot a little, add some controversy. I really like that.
Absolutely. And the funny thing is I'm like, well, why do we hate slabs? Or why is it like the butt of the joke? There used to be like, friends don't let friend climb slabs was like I think a kind of an old rifle meme or something like that. And
well, I'll give you my theory.
I'm not really sure, but
I'll give you my
I have
theory.
A theory too, but you go first.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, so I don't know how founded this is, but have you noticed that all the slabs outside seem to be really sandbagged? Like they are always really hard. Like people seem to not really give them the grades they're worth. And my theory is that they're really movement based rather than this whole bravado, like look at my biceps thing. And so I think women actually have an easier time starting with slabs because it's much more flowy, more technique, and less upper body strength, which is just how it is. Like when I started climbing, it took like a year in order to do a pull-up. Like this is just not what women can do right off the bat unless they have experience in other sports or unless they're, I guess, biologically inclined to have muscle. So anyways, a lot of my female friends like immediately gravitated towards slab, and I just feel like it might be a little sexist that no one likes slabs and they've downgraded slabs, and it seems like there's this lesser aspect to them, like, oh, well, that doesn't require as much strength or whatever it is in our priority lists. It's gotten shoved way to the bottom. And I think that's kind of messed up because it takes so much balance and strength of a different kind and mental fortitude to do slabs. And so I'm just trying to like equalize the playing field a little bit because I think they deserve so much more respect. Like they are scary, they're hard, and like no one can do them.
You just, I have a total agreement with you. Especially what you just said is they're scary, because I think that's actually the biggest hit against a lot of slab climbing, is that it tends to be older and it tends to be bolted poorly if it's bolted. And then even if it's bolted well, there's like this scariness to like the idea that you're going to sort of slide down it if you fall and like, whatever.
I have like chunks out of my
scrape
shin.
Your nipples off or something.
I have chunks out of my shin from falling on slabs.
Right.
Like,
So that's actually been my main theory is just that they're generally pretty scary. And they, and even like a trad slab, where you're trying to fiddle pieces in like you did at a much lower level, let's say a 5.9 version of that, it's still, I think they have a tendency to be scary, and that's what it comes down to. But you are also nailing it with you can't burrow your way through them, and that with especially gyms, because they devote very little terrain to slab climbing. They used to more so. I'm sure like older gyms, they had a lot more slabs in them. But I mean, we people just you're right, they suck at them, and people don't like to do things that they suck at. And if they climb 5 whatever on steep sport climbing, and now they climb 5.9 or whatever on a slab, that makes them mad.
Yeah, and it's not like
and they won't go back and do it.
You can't do a bunch of pull-ups and just get good at it. Like it just takes the time. Like you have to sit under that slab, and then you might not go anywhere. And that's like they're so frustrating. Like if you've been to Bishop Joshua Tree and you're trying the slab and you're just like on the start move, and then you fall and you're like, okay, and then you're smearing in a different location, but there's no holds, and it's just like people don't like to be bad at things. And I mean, I have really learned to love to be bad at things. This is why I'm doing so many different styles of climbing. I'm really bad at off width. I'm really bad at like most of the things I've been trying, but like that's probably why I really gravitated towards slab. I was like, okay, this is just like mental determination, really. Like you have to sit under slab for so long in order to get that move. And then that grows over years and years and years of doing that. Like now after 8 years of doing so much slab climbing, it just adds up. It's like you're training your brain and your muscles to just balance perfectly where it needs to.
Well, El Cap is very popular in the imagination, and most of the modern routes on there are slab climbs. So
that's true. Yeah.
I think so. It's like,
I've got to go and like start doing more big wall. I need to learn like rope systems. That's also some like future goals of mine.
Yeah, I think you'd kill it up there. Ask Hazel.
Yeah.
She's killed it up there, and she's coming from that slab background. So she's definitely killed it up there. But it's funny, the slab thing. It's always been the butt of the jokes, and here you are like, Although, I mean, I get like the catchiness of slab is sexy, but I don't.
Like, you can hate on it all you want. This is
just, the sort of stink bug like position isn't like the sexiest position. Do you know what I mean by the stink bug?
Movements are so sexy. You can't deny that the movements in slab are so sexy. Like, you just flow.
For the person doing them or the person watching
Maybe
them?
the person doing them.
Yeah, I think it's person doing them.
That's what's important anyways. Like, it's just...
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, I guess like if you're
anyway,
on the wall, like, oh my God, I'm going to die. It's not like the most sexy position.
Right.
But I think slab movement...
well, you're coming for those off with people. Like, that's passe. It's slabs now.
Yeah, exactly. It's the new fad. Trust me. Join. Buy a sticker. You're gonna want it. Everyone's gonna be talking about slabs. Just like, you wait.
Where do they get their stickers? Did you build your shop yet? I saw a post that you were going to.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have some.
Where did they find it?
Like some cool slab is sexy merch. You can find it on Etsy.
Okay, cool. We were just talking about sort of all this negativity around what happens to women out there. So let's go the other direction. Let's talk a little bit about, you feel sort of like, not just as a climber, but sort of in the media landscape, like what the sort of strengths of being a popular figure who's a woman, like if you can address, sort of your journey through it, but also, you becoming a role model to people. Because I think at times when people decide that they're going to be a public figure, they sort of forget a little bit about maybe that part of it, that all of a sudden that you're not just this figure of admiration, but you become something of a role model to everyone, but also to, in this day and age, to other women. And you've talked a little bit about that even in a roundabout way on this interview of how you've, dealt with being a woman in this space and everything like that. So tell me a little bit about how you feel about that, and what do you think your strengths are as a role model and as a media figure?
Yeah, I mean, that's a hard-hitting question because this has been on my mind a lot recently. I know we were just talking about all those negative comments, but I get a lot of beautiful positive comments, mostly from women and like young girls, about how I'm their role model. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. And I kind of want to just disappear a little bit because I'm like, am I the right person to be in the spotlight? But I think it's really important as I move forward just to be super honest. And that's I feel like we learn that in kindergarten, right? We learn how to person from an early age. But I think it's especially important if you're in the public face just to be like, not presenting a side of you that's perfect, but also not presenting a side of you that is going to be, I guess, that's going to make people concerned about how you are mentally. I just feel like there's a lot that I've been thinking about, and I want to show women and girls that they can be really, really strong. They can have a lot of fun. They don't have to look like the everyday narrative we get of people who are in the outdoors. Like, you can like fashion and you can get your nails done and you can still crush. And then also that you can also be vulnerable, emotional. You can be all of these things that I feel like the climbing community, or at least maybe this older climbing community, has really pushed down. You wouldn't really hear climbers talking about fear as much, I feel like, in the past, and you wouldn't really talk about the process. You would just see the send, and you wouldn't take a picture on a climb unless you've sent it. You wouldn't show the falls. I feel like there was just like this culture of being this macho climber, and that women have always tried to, well, maybe not always, I feel like women have tried to fit that mold as best as they can, but I kind of want to throw in a new option. It's like, we don't have to be a version of this bravado man. Like, you can just be yourself, and that's enough. And so that's kind of what I'm pushing. And I hope it's getting the right message across, and I hope people aren't taking it in the wrong way. And that's all I can really do. I can just try my best and put that out there and put out positivity and just hope the rest kind of unfolds. But yeah, it's like kind of out of my hands in a lot of ways. I just do the best I can, and that's it. It's
cool that you're talking about that as a paradigm, and without sounding like a jerk, you didn't invent that.
No.
It's like a new wave of what's happening in climbing with women. And when I say new, I'm not saying like, yesterday or whatever, but as someone who watches media, who interviews women, it's like, whether it's a female influence or whether it's a trend that's, a little bit bigger than just women, this idea of vulnerability within the stories in climbing, I think, has grown a ton in the last 10 years. The buzzword was storytellers. And a lot of times a storyteller in the outdoor space is simply that we're going to go beyond like the basics of man climbs mountain, man achieves, man, comes down to accolades kind of a thing. And so when we were talking about influence that women have on the sport, I think that's a really big one that's leaked into men's, stories that they're telling online as well. And I can't say this for sure because it's a very amorphous thing to talk about, but I feel like that it has been the influence of women like you and, maybe your predecessors of the last few years that has pushed everybody towards that space, if you will, of, wow, it's interesting when I talk a little bit about like troubles I'm having, that gets a lot of interest. Do you know what I mean? Or when I talk about these things around the send, that gets a lot of interest. Yeah. And do you know what I mean?
Totally. That's what I've been noticing a lot. Like people are really respecting that and they're craving it. It's like there's been this void and all of a sudden people are being vulnerable and talking about how it's a strength. And I think it's great. I think it's beautiful. I think it adds a lot to the sport too.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like it's sort of a thing that's being spearheaded or at least, pushed again by women climbers like yourself. And it's more leaking into like the male side of things. And and I think it's a good thing too, because it makes the whole, I wouldn't have a show, I wouldn't have this podcast if that wasn't the case, if people didn't crave stuff behind how hard you climb, you know? And that's been the running joke for years of like, well, who cares? I do care still.
And a lot of people
we
care.
Want people,
yeah.
And we want people to perform because we want to admire them as the work they put in, and it's like not unusual that LeBron James gets more press than the ninth man on the Clippers or whatever, or some other team. It's like, it's understandable. We're humans. We want to be impressed. We want to be inspired. But there's just so much more around it, I think. And again, I think come from that side of the influence of people like you that are doing that at some level.
Yeah, I hope that I'm having some impact, and I don't know how far my reach is, but it's nice to know that within some communities, like what I'm doing actually makes a difference, and hopefully it will continue to make a difference because I think it's making it just overall a more inclusive space for everyone to feel all of the feels and just enjoy the sport as what it is.
All right, folks, thanks for listening, and thanks to Anna for making the connection and doing that, sitting down, talking, having fun. And I love the image of her marching across a gym and confronting some dickhead. Hopefully we're all backing up the women that do that. Okay, folks, getting to be springtime, definitely desert season out here in the West. I know the ice is still hanging there too. But whatever you're doing out there, make sure you look after each other, confront misogyny, confront racism, because she does that too. We didn't get into that. But Anna is a crusader in that field as well. So let's follow her example. Make it a more pleasant, inclusive place out there, more fun for everybody, and safer. Of course, check your knots.
Hi there.
Who are you?
I'm old Greg. Pleased to meet you.
What do you want?
Maybe I should ask you the same question. What you doing in my waters?
Just taking the air, you know. Not fishing.
Well, then how come this hook's in my head, fool?
It's nothing to do with me, sir.
It's attached to your rod, mother liquor.
Don't kill me. I've got so much to give.
Easy now, fuzzy little man Peach. You ever drunk Baileys from a shoe?
What?
You wanna come to a club where people wee on each other?
No.
I'm gonna hurt you.
Excuse me?
I like you. What do you think of me?
I don't rightly know, sir.
Make an assessment.
I think you're a nice, modern gentleman.
Don't lie to me, boy.
I'm not lying.
I know what you're thinking. Here comes old Greg. He's a scaly manfish. You don't know me. You don't know what I got. I got something to show you. You know what that is? That's old Greg's vagina. I got a mangina. I'm old Greg.